In a world teetering on the brink of chaos, or war, famine, and natural disasters ravaged nations, there came a man who promised to bring peace. His name was Adrian Locke. Handsome, charismatic, and undeniably brilliant, Adrian seemed to emerge out of nowhere. He was a figure of profound magnetism, possessing an aura that drew people in and made them believe in something greater. But beneath the polished exterior and the promises of salvation lay a darkness, one that would soon consume the world. Adrian first appeared in the public eye during a time of global crisis. Nations were locked in bitter conflict, economies were collapsing, and the very fabric of society was fraying. People were desperate for hope, for someone to lead them out of the darkness. Adrian's rise began subtly. He was a wealthy businessman, known for his philanthropy and his work in promoting peace initiatives. His speeches, delivered with eloquence and passion, captivated audiences around the world. He spoke of unity, of breaking down the barriers that divided humanity, of creating a world where all could live in harmony. At first, Adrian was just another influential figure among many, but his influence grew quickly. Within months, he was being invited to speak at global summits, meeting with world leaders, and mediating conflicts. Everywhere he went, peace seemed to follow. Ceasefires were declared, treaties were signed, and economies stabilized. It was as if Adrian had a supernatural ability to calm tensions and bring people together. The media began to call him the man of peace, and soon, Adrian Locke was a household name. But there was something more to Adrian than his ability to charm crowds. Behind closed doors, he wielded incredible power, manipulating events with a skill that seemed almost otherworldly. He had an uncanny ability to predict outcomes, to know exactly what needed to be done to achieve his goals. Those who opposed him found themselves sidelined or discredited, often by mysterious circumstances that could never quite be explained. And yet, no one could prove anything. Adrian's public persona remained spotless. As Adrian's influence grew, so did his following. People began to see him as more than just a leader, they saw him as a savior. His speeches took on a spiritual tone, and soon, a new movement began to emerge, one that blended politics and religion into a powerful ideology. Adrian spoke of a new era for humanity, an age of enlightenment where war, poverty, and suffering would be eradicated. He promised a utopia, a paradise on earth, and people believed him. Across the world, Adrian's movement gained momentum. Governments began to collapse under the weight of internal corruption and external pressure, and in their place, new administrations rose, ones loyal to Adrian's vision. Nations that had once been enemies now worked together under his guidance, united in their belief that he was the key to a better future. The United Nations, struggling for relevance, reorganized itself around Adrian's leadership, and soon, he was elected as the Secretary General, with unprecedented power. But even as the world seemed to unite under his rule, strange things began to happen. There were whispers of a dark power behind Adrian's rise, of secret rituals, of strange occurrences that defied explanation. Natural disasters became more frequent and more devastating. Unexplained phenomena began to occur, mass hallucinations, eerie lights in the sky, and strange symbols appearing in remote locations. The world was changing, and not all of it could be explained by science. Some religious leaders began to warn that Adrian was not what he seemed. They pointed to ancient prophecies, to scriptures that spoke of a false savior who would deceive the world and lead humanity into darkness. But their warnings were drowned out by the overwhelming tide of support for Adrian. Those who opposed him were labeled as fearmongers, relics of an old, divisive world. Churches that refused to embrace his new vision found themselves losing followers, and in some cases, they were shut down by governments eager to maintain order. As the years passed, Adrian's power solidified. He established a new global government, the World Federation, with himself as the undisputed leader. The Federation promoted a new religion, one that blended elements of all the world's faiths into a unified belief system centered around the worship of humanity's potential. Statues of Adrian were erected in every major city, and his image was broadcast on screens around the world. His followers, now numbering in the billions, referred to him as the Enlightened One. But behind the facade of peace and progress, Adrian's true nature began to reveal itself. The utopia he promised was built on control. Surveillance was omnipresent, and dissent was ruthlessly crushed. Those who questioned his rule were taken away in the night, never to be seen again. The media, once free, now operated as an arm of the state, broadcasting only approved messages. The world had become a paradise on the surface, but underneath, it was a prison. Then came the plague of shadows. It started in a remote village, deep in the heart of Africa. People began to fall ill, their bodies wasting away as if drained of life itself. The disease spread rapidly, defying all attempts to contain it. Doctors and scientists were baffled, there was no virus, no bacteria, nothing that could explain the sickness. And yet, it continued to spread, moving from continent to continent with terrifying speed. Panic gripped the world as entire cities were quarantined, and millions died. In the midst of the chaos, Adrian remained calm. He addressed the world, reassuring the people that the plague of shadows was simply another trial, a test that humanity would overcome under his guidance. And then, miraculously, a cure was discovered. It was administered through a single dose of an experimental drug, one that Adrian himself had helped develop. Those who received the cure were saved, but there was a catch: the drug also contained a tracking nanobot, linking every individual to the global network Adrian had created. From that moment on, the World Federation had complete control over every person on the planet. The cure was mandatory, and those who refused it were cast out of society, left to fend for themselves in a world that had no place for them. These outcasts formed resistance groups, hiding in the wilderness and underground, but they were hunted relentlessly by Adrian's forces. They called him by a new name now, the Antichrist. They had come to realize that the prophecies were true. Adrian Locke was not humanity's savior, but its doom. Adrian's rule became more overtly tyrannical as the years passed. He declared himself divine, the embodiment of humanity's potential and the ruler of the new age. The World Federation's new religion became mandatory, and worship of any other gods was forbidden. Temples were built in Adrian's honor, and his followers were required to pledge their loyalty to him above all else. Those who opposed him were branded as heretics and enemies of the state. The resistance, though small, continued to fight, launching guerrilla attacks against the Federation's forces. But they were vastly outnumbered and outmatched. Adrian's power was absolute, and it seemed that nothing could stop him. But deep within the resistance, a group of scholars and religious leaders had been studying the ancient texts, searching for a way to defeat Adrian. They believed that there was a prophecy, a final battle between the forces of light and darkness, where the Antichrist would be defeated by a chosen one, a person born under a rare celestial alignment who would possess the power to challenge Adrian. As Adrian's power grew, so did the resistance's desperation. They searched for the prophesied one, following ancient maps and deciphering cryptic clues. Finally, they found him, a young man named Daniel, living in a remote village far from the cities. Daniel was an unremarkable figure, a simple farmer who had no knowledge of the prophecy or the world beyond his village. But the scholars were convinced that he was the last hope for humanity. Reluctantly, Daniel joined the resistance. He trained with them, learning to fight, but more importantly, he began to discover his true power, a power that was not physical, but spiritual. As he grew stronger, he began to have visions, glimpses of a great battle, of Adrian's downfall, and of a world reborn. The final confrontation came on the eve of Adrian's 50th year in power. The resistance, led by Daniel, launched a daring assault on Adrian's stronghold, a massive fortress in the heart of what had once been the city of Rome. The battle was fierce, with the resistance fighting against impossible odds. But Daniel's presence seemed to inspire them, giving them the strength to push forward. In the depths of the fortress, Daniel confronted Adrian. The two stood face to face in the throne room, the weight of the prophecy hanging over them. Adrian, now fully aware of who Daniel was, smiled coldly. He had prepared for this moment, and he was confident in his victory. "You think you can stop me?" Adrian said, his voice filled with disdain. "I am the ruler of this world, the embodiment of its future. You are nothing but a child clinging to ancient superstitions." Daniel, though afraid, stood his ground. He could feel the power within him, the power that had been building since the day he joined the resistance. It was a power that came not from strength or skill, but from something deeper, a connection to the divine, to the very force that had created the universe. The battle between them was not fought with weapons, but with will. Adrian unleashed his full power, summoning dark forces that had lain dormant for millennia. The ground shook, and the very air seemed to crackle with energy. But Daniel fought back, drawing on the light within him, pushing back the darkness. In the end, it was not strength that won the day,